Restaurant pervert. I am a waitress at a very small Italian restaurant. There's only 12 tables in the restaurant. We usually only 2 to 3 servers working per shift, so we notice a lot that goes on. This incident that I'm about to explain happened back in December. I would always have this man come in to eat by himself. I would say he's in his late 50s. I would always wait on him and he would always try his best to strike up conversation with me. He would also ask pretty personal questions about me. I once mentioned that I was a dancer, and he asked if I would send him a video of me. I told him maybe, and that was it. A few weeks passed after that and he came in to eat during our rush and didn't say as much as he usually would. He sat in the very back corner and ordered what he usually got. As I was taking care of my other customers, I felt that someone was watching me. You know that feeling you get when someone is watching your every move? That one. When I was finished writing down a table's order, I glanced at the man and saw that he was staring bullets at me. He was red in the face, just scowling at me. I thought it was odd since I've never seen him act like that before. I sort of just ignored him until I had to run him his food or ask if he needed anything. When I did have to do that, he gave me this huge creepy grin and kept his hands under the table. I tried to hand him his water glass, but kept his hands there. I thought it was weird and didn't pay any attention to it since I had so many other things to do. About 20 minutes after, the man left. I went to clean his table and found multiple wadded up napkins on the floor where he was sitting. I went to see if he tipped, and he left about $7. Right next to it he left a napkin and wrote a note that read, "I'll see you soon, my name." I never told this man my name. I was so disturbed and grossed out by this that I went directly to the owner and told him everything. He sent me home right after, and told me that he'd look into it when we closed. I haven't seen that man since, and I hope I never do. A few months ago I asked my boss if he did look into it and he said there was nothing he could do besides ban him. I asked if we could find his name through his payments, but he always paid in cash so it was impossible. So, guy who masturbated to me during my shift, let's not meet again. Creepy man at restaurant. This was in the 90s when I was about 15. My mom, my best friend and I were in Florida on vacation for 3 weeks. We discovered Sizzlers and really loved it, so we ended up going for dinner there quite often. Also got to know the waiters a bit. One night we noticed a middle-aged man sitting at a nearby table, who was staring, and I mean really staring, at me. He was with a young boy, maybe 5 to 6 years old. They had already finished their dinner but the guy was just transfixed, completely ignoring his kid. He wasn't smiling or frowning. Just a blank-faced stare. My mom was getting really uncomfortable, so she spoke to one of the male waiters who we'd become friendly with. I don't know what exactly she said to him, but I think it was basically to help keep an eye on it. It might be worth mentioning that my mother is usually quite comfortable with confronting strangers if required, but something made her choose not to in this case. The guy and the little kid eventually left, though it took what seemed like an eternity. Once they'd left, we were just relieved and carried on our dinner. I think we were there for at least another hour before we were ready to go. When we were getting into our car, I noticed another car parked a bit behind us with someone sitting inside. It was the guy from the restaurant. Without a kid in sight. Even worse, when we started driving. He started his car, without his headlights on, started following us. We basically freaked the fuck out. My mom started driving in a different direction of the hotel as to not lead him to where we were staying. We drove around for a while before we eventually lost him. Finally getting to the hotel, my mom went straight to the front desk to inform them about what happened and to please keep an eye out. I'm not sure if they contacted the police, but we were all just glad to be safe. Thankfully nothing else happened after that, other than a terrible night's sleep, but it was scary as hell at the time, especially because he seemed to have lost his kid and just waited for us, anyway. Freak from Sizzlers, let's not meet. An old regular from the restaurant industry. I started waiting tables when I was 18 to supplement my hourly income at a popular fast food chain, and soon enough I became well acquainted with an older man named Tim. He's probably in his early to mid-60s and very obese. He would regularly come into the little diner that I worked at, and was a regular prior to my employment there. The other younger females who worked in the restaurant didn't like to wait on him because he was kind of weird and had a creepy, overly excited / animated type of vibe, but I didn't mind because it was a guaranteed $5 to $10 every day. I was good at talking to people, good at putting up with bullshit, and used the adjective unfuckwithable to describe myself. So I happily entertained him in the family-friendly environment. The first thing he would do was make cartoons on the computer and excitedly give them to me / other servers. The other servers were uncomfortable with it, even though at this point it was very innocent. It was generic clip art that maybe had everyone's names written by each character. Still, some servers were uncomfortable enough that management had asked him to stop bringing them in. He asked me if I liked them, almost in an unexplainable childlike way, seeking approval, so I told him they were cute / fun because they were harmless enough, and I could tell that making them and gifting them made him happy. I figured it was his pastime during the later part of his life. He was unmarried, had no kids, and his daily hobby was visiting different women at different restaurants, some of them older, some of them younger like I was. He would regularly talk about the lives of the other waitresses he would visit, and though I hadn't met any of them, I genuinely felt like I knew them. I just figured the guy was lonely, and there's nothing wrong with that. He would call me Sunshine, and try to offer advice where it wasn't warranted / solicited. I wasn't afraid to, respectfully yet aggressively, put him in his place. I remember one specific occasion that he tried to criticize my relationship with my boyfriend, and it was like what you'd think a super conservative grandparent might think. Expressed to me as if he was my father and providing me life-changing insight to put me on the right path, though I wasn't on a wrong path. I was a full-time student, full-time employee, fully supported myself, and had a good attitude / outlook on life, hence the adjective unfuckwithable. Anyway, I put him in his place so hard and so fast that he turned sheepish and childlike. Like he transitioned from trying to be a father to acting like a child who needed my approval. The next time he visited, he had a hand-carved woodworking that he had made with my boyfriend's initials on them as an apology. He would buy me packs of gum and mints and tape-printed photos of himself with a scolding look and the caption, "No smoking, Sunshine." To try to deter me from cigarettes, I've since quit. Without his help, LOL. Everyone else thought it was creepy, but whatever, right? Through the first year of me being his waitress, his gifts and actions got progressively more expressive. He started writing poems and short stories that had bad grammar and were so elementary they were almost painful. But he told me he just started to try it out, so I encouraged him, thinking he's lonely and needs a pastime. I had no problem with him writing little Hallmark card-style poems and giving them to me. The slightly off-putting aspect to this was that all of the poems and stories had a general theme of love and family. Also, I think it was around this time that he started looking at my Facebook page regularly. We weren't friends, and I told him I was never going to accept a friend request, so don't ever send one. Harsh, but boundaries, right? He would occasionally Photoshop pictures of me from my Facebook page and maybe put my face on a cartoon body or something like that. He also kind of started to obsess over the fact that I was a twin, and he became very interested in me and all of my sisters. He would write stories about the twins, or the sisters, or make comic book-style artwork about the twin superheroes. He even found a photo of my twin on Facebook somewhere and started using her face photoshopped on things too. When I did some traveling, I took some artsy-style pictures with the view in the background. And he took the liberty to Photoshop other tourists out of the background, lighten the sky, and print lamented pictures with fancy borders for me to have. Thinking about it now, he probably kept these photos for himself too. After a year at my first serving job, I left for another serving job where I would be working weird / third shift hours. I kind of thought that would be the end of Tim, but boy was I wrong. He went out of his way to come at the weird hours and at the new place at least twice a week. I still maintained my fast food job, and he even started to visit me there, at a place that people rarely come in and sit down to eat. Never once did I tell him my schedule. He would just drive by and see me car. The stories he would write became progressively sexual and longer. I guess he finally felt comfortable to share these things with me, and he would always preface me for anything that was more erotic. It was like he wanted a friend, he wanted to be my father, and he wanted me to be his mother, all in this weird, childish, overly animated type of way. A few times he made me the subject of his stories, though he never went super explicit with those. One that sticks out was me being a super sexy badass cowgirl sheriff and all the men of the saloon wanted me. He would include weird freaking details like how someone had an STD. If I remember correctly, he made my sister the character that got an STD and I had a huge issue with it. And I particularly had a huge issue with the fact that he started the story with, "This is the true story of." He rewrote the story without changing anything except for, "This is not a true story," and, "Who did not get an STD, ick." It was wild. There's also a weird photo that he took of my sister and I when she worked at the same place as I did. The whole time I knew him, he took a total of 2 pictures of me with his digital camera, and this was one of them. He had us pose with our hands out like we had a serving platter sitting on our hands. He then photoshopped a plate with his head on it and photoshopped knives in our hands. He thought it was the funniest thing ever, and printed and laminated one for each of us to keep. At this point, I've known this man and been well acquainted with him for nearly 3 years. I genuinely felt sorry for the guy and felt like I was able to offer him a friend when he really needed one. Aside from visiting waitresses, his hobbies included visiting an occasional burlesque show and attending the local courts just for fun. I was very aware that something was off about him, but I was okay with it because though it was too hard to pinpoint exactly, I understood and also knew he would never, or could never given his size and fitness, hurt me. Admittedly, this was a fault of mine as a server. I offered more than food. I accidentally became a psychiatrist. There was a mid-20 years old with autism I became good buddies with despite him offering me money every once in a while for a blowjob. There was a 40-year-old man who thought he was going to marry a stripper half his age after he gave her all of his savings and sold his Mustang to give her more money, and there was the paranoid 50-year-old schizophrenic man who had clearly never been diagnosed or received any help, and I was honored to be the person he felt comfortable practicing his social skills with. Ick, I digress. I guess I just want to be transparent that I was aware of all the red flags but I was okay with it. But then things started to really cross a line, though they were probably already past, when I got engaged. He would ask me stuff like if I'd let him hold my baby when I have kids, and he started to write stories and make cards and cartoons from my fiance's perspective. He would say, "I bet this is how Luke feels about you." He would also do it from a mother's perspective, saying stuff like, "It must be a mother's dream." I mean, at this point he was seriously making me so much stuff, be it cartoons, pictures, or stories, that he would bring it all to me in a manila folder, and it would be along the lines of fatherly, motherly, childish, silly, sexual, romance, etc. I decided to keep the folders in my filing cabinet just in case there was ever some type of case against him that needed evidence. My fiancée and I had an open dialogue about Tim, and at this point we decided that it was best to cut him off. I was looking for a new job to get off of the wacky hours I was working. And the timing just seemed right. Tim was also regularly sending me applications to all restaurants he wouldn't mind going to. So yeah, there needed to be a break. My fiancée wanted to talk to him so I didn't seem like the bad guy, and all contact was cut. He respected it, to an extent. After cutting him off, Tim still had a weird contact with me through my older sister. She was a server at another restaurant that he frequented, though she avoided him and asked to never serve him given his interactions with me. However, she was also engaged and her wedding date was approaching. He also wrote her letters and made her cards with words that were way too heartfelt coming from a stranger regarding her marriage. Anyway, Tim decided to ask a few of the other servers if they were planning on going to the wedding. 2 of them were, and upon hearing this news, Tim described me in detail and asked the other servers to try to take some pictures of me for him. When I heard this, it was about 6 months after I had cut him off. I had a big fat eye roll over it and thought whatever about it because the servers weren't going to do it and he was still respecting our request to not contact me any longer. It's also relevant to note he's been blocked from my Facebook, which I haven't even actively used in 2 years or more anyway. But prior to the cutoff, even shortly after the cutoff, he still sent me multiple messages on Facebook every day. From as simple as, "Good morning sunshine," to intricate and extensive stories, so, a timeline reminder before the punchline. I first waited on him around May 2015, he followed me to my next job and my long-term fast food job around the middle of 2016 and continued to follow me. I cut him off around February/March 2018, When I was cleaning out my filing cabinet in December of 2019, I stupidly decided that I can throw all the weird, creepy, unsolicited artwork away. It had been nearly 2 years with no issues, no attempt to contact, and the stuff was just cluttering my space. Last week, as I was sitting in my living room, a recognizable vehicle is parked outside of my driveway on the wrong side of the road. The man has his car window down, and I see a flash. I quickly grab my glasses to try to discern WTF is going on. I see his childish, overly animated smile, and I recognize his hair/facial hair and realize the shirt he is wearing is the same exact style/type of shirt Tim wears. I realize I recognize the vehicle because it's the same vehicle that would pull up to my place of employment 3 to 5 times a week for almost 3 years. Flash, I realize it's fucking Tim outside of my motherfucking residence over 2 years later, taking pictures of my car/home with that goddamn digital camera that he took my picture with twice before in the past. Tim. Let's not meet.